300,000 computers, 150 countries, locked in a single Friday afternoon. That is not a slide from a study guide. That is what happened, and today we are going to show it to you instead of just listing it. And here's the detail that should change how you study malware for the rest of your career. A free patch that would have stopped every one of those infections was sitting on Microsoft's website 2 full months before the attack. Nobody had to write new code to stay safe. They just had to install an update that was already waiting. Keep that in your pocket, because it is the whole point of this episode.
Hey everyone, Erica here. That attack was WannaCry, back in May 2017. It is the perfect place to start because it touches almost every idea on this objective at once. On the Security Plus exam, Objective 2.4 asks you to do one precise thing. Tell the malware types apart by what they actually do, not by how they sound.
Hi all, I'm Maya, and I need you to feel why that Friday mattered. Hospitals turned patients away. Surgeries got canceled because the screens were frozen. This was not an inconvenience on a slide. It was a worm reaching straight into an emergency room.
Lewis here, and we have already run this experiment more than once. WannaCry was 2 pieces of malware wearing a single coat, a worm that copied itself from machine to machine, bolted onto ransomware that encrypted your files and demanded money. That combination is exactly why one infection became a global event in hours. The door it walked through had a name. An old file-sharing protocol, SMB version 1, left switched on and unpatched on machines all over the world. The exploit was Eternal Blue, and it needed 0 clicks from the user. No human had to open a thing, which is what let it spread like wildfire instead of a chain letter.
Which is the cruelest part of the case. Microsoft shipped the fix, Bulletin MS-17-010, on March 14th. The worm launched 2 months later, and it only reached machines that never installed it. The patched machines watched it sail right past.
So before we name the family, sit with exactly what a victim met the moment it hit. This next thing is real, pulled from the public record, not a recreation. Give it a second, because this is what a worm payload does to an actual person. This is the real WannaCry ransom note. The headline reads, "Oops, your files have been encrypted." 2 countdown clocks run against you at once, one until the price doubles, one until your files are gone for good.
Look at the demand on that screen. $300 in Bitcoin, climbing to $600, paid to an anonymous wallet. The clock, the price hike, the wallet, every pixel of it is engineered pressure aimed at a frightened person.
That single screen is why ransomware is the most feared word on this objective. It is malware with a business model. The attacker does not want your files, they want you to pay to get them back, and the whole operation is built to make paying feel like the only exit. Understand that motive, and the rest of ransomware makes sense.
And the way it ended is the part nobody expects. A young researcher named Marcus Hutchins was pulling the worm apart and noticed it checked for one unregistered web domain before encrypting. He registered that domain for about $10, and the spread slowed worldwide, a kill switch found almost by accident.
I think one of our viewers framed the real confusion better than we could. Liam, this is the question sitting under every malware video out there, so read it out for the room.
It is the one that trips up half of exam takers, and here it is. If WannaCry was a worm and also ransomware, how am I supposed to pick one answer when CompTIA asks what type it is? And the answer reframes everything. A normal virus would have stayed on one machine. WannaCry froze 150 countries in hours because of a single property we keep circling, which is how it travels. Get that one idea straight, and the whole list of names stops feeling like memorization. So before we hunt indicators, let us settle exactly how the exam wants you to sort these apart, starting with the 2 questions that decode every one of them.
Pick by behavior, never by name. That is the answer to the question Liam just raised, and it is the single most reliable way to get malware questions right under exam pressure. When the clock is running and 2 answers look close, the behavior described in the question stem is your tiebreaker. CompTIA does not test whether you memorized a marketing label. It tests whether you can read what a thing actually did and map that action to its correct category. So here are the 2 questions that separate every type on this objective.
Question 1. How does it spread? Question 2. What is the payload? What does it do once it lands? Answer those 2 and the names sort themselves, because each one is just a different pair of answers to those 2 questions. Let me run the family tree. A virus is the classic. It attaches to a host file, a document, or an executable, and it needs a human to open that file before it runs. No double click, no spread. It is malware that requires a volunteer.
Viruses come in flavors the exam likes to name. A boot sector virus hides in the part of the disk that loads before the operating system even starts. A macro virus rides inside a document and triggers when you enable macros. Different hiding spots, same core behavior, which is to attach and wait for a human.
A worm removes the volunteer entirely. It self-propagates across the network on its own, hunting the next vulnerable machine with no host file and no click. That is exactly why WannaCry hit 300,000 boxes so fast. Nobody had to lift a finger.
And the worm is not new. In 2010, a worm called Stuxnet spread through industrial systems and is widely reported to have wrecked Iranian nuclear centrifuges. Same self-spreading behavior, a very different payload.
So my read is, the difference between a virus and a worm is really one word: autonomy. The worm drives itself, and the virus needs a passenger to turn the key. Am I hearing that right?
Exactly right, Liam. 2 checkboxes settle every one of them. Does it self-spread, and does it need a click? The virus is the first row. It does not self-spread, and it does need a click. The worm flips the first column. It self-spreads, and it needs no click, which is the whole reason it travels so fast. The Trojan looks like the virus on this grid. It needs the click, and it does not spread on its own.
So on that grid, the virus and the Trojan are twins. Both need a click, and neither self-spreads. What actually separates them?
Intent and disguise. The Trojan is named for the Trojan horse. It disguises itself as something you want, maybe a free game or a cracked invoice. Once you run it, it betrays you and opens the door for the attacker. The Zeus Trojan did exactly that for years, stealing millions of banking logins by posing as an ordinary download.
And the Trojan is where the trick wording lives. A Trojan does not self-replicate. So when a question says the threat spread on its own with no user action, the answer is worm and never Trojan, even if it arrived looking like a download.
Hold on, let me push on that one.
Go ahead, that is the whole point of doing this together.
Here is the trap I want viewers to dodge, because it costs real points. WannaCry was both delivered to a machine and able to self-spread, so which answer is correct depends entirely on the verb in the question. If they ask how it propagated, it is a worm. If they ask what it did to your files, it is ransomware that encrypts your data and extorts a payment. Same malware, 2 right answers, 2 different lenses.
So ransomware is defined by its payload. It encrypts your data and extorts a payment to release it. WannaCry is a worm by propagation and ransomware by payload, and a fair question will tell you which lens it wants.
Modern ransomware added a second squeeze called double extortion. Before they encrypt, they copy your data out first. So even with perfect backups, they still threaten to leak your customer records unless you pay, which turns a recovery problem into a public disclosure problem. Backups stop the encryption pain, but not the leak threat.
One more the exam slips in is fileless malware. It never writes a file to disk at all. It lives entirely in memory, often abusing a trusted tool already on the machine like PowerShell, which the exam calls living off the land. No file means nothing for your antivirus to scan, which is exactly why memory and behavior monitoring matter so much.
Before we leave the family tree, I want to clear up the one that always confuses my study group. Maya, I think you are sitting on the question everyone raises here, so put it to us.
I am. Here it is. Is bloatware actually malware, or is it just annoying junk that does not belong on a malware objective at all?
Good question, and here is the honest answer. Bloatware is the unwanted pre-installed junk that ships on a new laptop, the trial antivirus, the manufacturer toolbar. It is not strictly malicious, but it consumes resources and widens your attack surface, so CompTIA folded it into Objective 2.4. Know it as the gray area member of the list, and you will not overthink it on exam day. Now let us meet the members who win by making sure you never notice them at all.
Real quick, because this next part matters to you. If any of this is helping, tap that like button, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next one finds you. Both are free and take about a second, but they tell the algorithm to show this to one more person who needs it. Not every piece of malware wants you to see a countdown clock. The most dangerous ones want you to see nothing at all. Where ransomware screams for attention, this next group survives by staying invisible for months. That is the other half of Objective 2.4, the quiet crew.
Several types live here, and they trade noise for stealth. The first two are about surveillance. Spyware watches your behavior, what you browse and what you buy, and ships it back to whoever planted it.
Think of spyware as a spectrum, because the exam blurs it on purpose. At the mild end is adware, which just watches to serve you ads. At the dangerous end is full surveillance, pulling your banking habits. Same family, very different intent, and CompTIA wants you to know spyware is the umbrella term the others live underneath.
Spyware watches, but a keylogger is the precise one. It records every keystroke you type. That means your passwords and your card numbers captured letter by letter as you press the keys. It does not have to crack anything, it simply reads over your shoulder while you type the secret yourself.
And here is a distinction the exam loves. A keylogger can be software hiding in your operating system, or it can be hardware, a tiny dongle plugged in between your keyboard and the computer. The hardware kind never touches the disk, so your antivirus will never find it. Only a physical inspection of the actual cable will, which is why a clean malware scan is never the whole answer.
Then the logic bomb, and this one is pure patience. It is dormant code planted inside a normal program that does nothing until a trigger fires. A specific date, or an event, like a name disappearing from the company payroll. The malware is already inside, sitting quietly, waiting for the condition that wakes it up.
And that payroll detail is the classic exam scenario. A disgruntled admin plants code that wipes the servers 90 days after their account is deleted. No account. The bomb goes off. The trigger is the firing itself, which makes it cruelly personal, and that is a logic bomb. Every single time.
The king of stealth is the rootkit. It burrows down to the kernel level, the deepest and most trusted part of the operating system, and from there it lies to every tool you own. You ask the system to list its files, and the rootkit edits the answer before you ever see it.
So a rootkit is like a corrupt security guard who controls every camera in the building. You ask to see the footage, and he hands you a tape he already edited. The crime is on the original, but you only ever see the cut he approves, so the tools you trust most are the ones lying to you hardest.
And we have all met a rootkit, even if we did not know it. In 2005, Sony BMG shipped about 2 million music CDs that secretly installed rootkit software to stop you copying the disc. It hid itself so well that other malware started hiding behind it, and the government issued a public warning.
Here is the brutal exam takeaway on removal. Because a rootkit controls the system from below, you cannot trust the system to clean itself. The real answers are boot from known clean external media the rootkit does not control, or simply wipe the machine and re-image it. When the guard is corrupt, you do not ask the guard to investigate himself.
And the last member of the crew makes your machine part of an army. A bot is malware that quietly enlists your computer, and a network of thousands of them is a botnet the attacker rents out. The Mirai botnet did that with cheap smart devices, then knocked huge chunks of the internet offline in 2016.
Which raises the question that has been bugging me this whole scene. If a rootkit lies to your tools, and a bot sits there quietly waiting for orders, how does anyone ever catch one? It feels impossible.
That is the perfect question, and we called in someone who does this for a living to answer it properly. We have a malware analyst on the line, someone who reverse engineers these samples all day. Daniel, can you hear us? How do you catch a thing built to hide?
I can hear you, and the trick is that you stop trusting the running machine entirely. The system can lie, but the file on disk has to contain the truth because the malware itself has to read its own configuration to work. So I read the file without ever executing it.
So you treat the live system as a hostile witness, and you go straight to the physical evidence instead. The file on disk cannot lie about what it has to read.
Exactly. My first move on almost any sample is a command called strings, which just prints every readable line of text buried inside the binary. The malware has to store the address it phones home to somewhere, and strings drags it right out into the light.
Can you walk us through it, Daniel? Because I think people need to see it to believe a hidden thing gives itself up that easily.
Happy to. We have a suspicious file in a lockdown lab virtual machine, and we do not run it. I check what it is, then run strings and filter for anything that looks like a web address or an IP. Watch what falls out. And there it is, the text the malware could not hide. A hard-coded web address it calls home to, a raw IP, a hidden temp folder, and an encryption marker. The program has to read those to function, so it carries them, and that means I get to read them too.
So that is how you beat the rootkits lie. The running system can fool your tools, but the file on disk has to tell the truth to itself. We just pulled the attacker's fingerprints out of a file we never executed. Daniel, thank you, that made it concrete.
My pleasure, and one honest caveat. Smart authors pack and encrypt their own code, so strings comes back nearly empty. But that emptiness is itself a clue, and then you reach for a disassembler and dynamic analysis instead.
That address Daniel just pulled is going to matter in about 30 seconds. Because if that malware is live, the machine is talking to that exact address right now, and a live connection is much harder to hide than a file.
Every infection leaves fingerprints. CompTIA calls them indicators of compromise, and Objective 2.4 lists the exact ones you will be tested on. This is where you stop describing malware and start hunting it. And these are not abstract, they are the literal clues buried in a real exam question stem. So learning to spot them is learning to read the question.
Picture Marcus, a brand new Tier 1 analyst on his first night shift at a regional bank. An alert fires at 3 in the morning. A finance laptop is running hot, nobody is logged in, and one account just locked itself out twice. 3 separate signals at once. On a machine that should be asleep. Marcus does not panic. He runs the exact playbook we are about to walk, indicator by indicator, and within 20 minutes he can tell his boss whether this is a false alarm or an active intrusion. By the end of this scene, you could run it too.
Let me give you the exam names directly, because they show up as the scenario clues in the stem. The first cluster is about stolen credentials being used.
Account lockout and impossible travel. A user logs in from Ohio at 9 in the morning, then from another continent 4 minutes later. No human flies that fast, so the only explanation is that 2 different people are using one account. That is a stolen credential, and impossible travel is the indicator that catches it.
Account lockout works the other direction too, right? If an account suddenly locks itself out over and over, that is often an attacker spraying passwords against it, getting stopped by your own lockout policy. That lockout you find annoying is sometimes your first alarm bell.
That is the read. The next cluster is resources. Resource consumption is a machine pegging the CPU, the disk, or the network with no legitimate reason, like that laptop running hot at 3 in the morning because a crypto miner is using your hardware to mine coins for someone else. Resource inaccessibility is the ransomware version, where your files are simply gone.
And then my favorite category, because it is the one that proves a human was here. The log clues. Out-of-cycle logging and missing logs.
Missing logs is the loud one. If a chunk of your security log just vanished, that is not a glitch. An attacker deleted it to cover their tracks. Out-of-cycle logging is an event firing at a time it never normally would, like an administrator login at 2 on a Sunday morning.
Concurrent session usage and blocked content round out the list. Concurrent sessions is one account logged in from several places at once, which often pairs with that impossible travel clue. Blocked content is your own tool reporting that it stopped an outbound site or download, and that block is a signal that something inside tried to reach out and got caught at the wire.
The last one is almost philosophical: published or documented attacks. If a vendor or a government feed reports a fresh campaign and your environment matches the profile, treat that public report itself as a reason to go hunting. That is threat intelligence doing its job, turning someone else's bad day into your early warning. The compromise may already be here.
So let us stop listing and start hunting. Remember the address Daniel pulled out of the binary. If the malware is live, the machine is talking to it right now, and a live connection cannot hide from the network stack. Erica, check it.
On Linux, we use SS, the modern socket lister. The flags say show me TCP, UDP, listening, and the process behind each one. We are looking for an outbound connection nobody asked for, and there it is. An established connection to the exact same address Daniel pulled from the file on port 443 to blend in with normal web traffic. And look at the process name, systemd-udev. That is a real system service the malware is impersonating to hide in plain sight.
That process ID is the thread you pull. You take the number, list the process, and the abstract connection suddenly has a name and a file path on disk. And you are right back to where we started, a real file you can run strings on. The hunt is a loop, and every loop tightens the net around the malware.
And on Windows, you would run the same hunt with netstat-ANO, which adds the process ID so you can trace the connection back to the program that owns it. Same idea, different command, both fair game on the exam. The lesson is the move, not the tool, so do not let the operating system in the question throw you.
Now the last move, and it is the one that catches the beacon in the act. We tail the firewall log live with -F, so new lines stream onto the screen the instant they are written. Watch the beacon check in on a timer.
And that perfect rhythm is the giveaway. Every 60 seconds, the same size packet to the same address. Humans do not browse on a metronome. That regular heartbeat is a command and control beacon, the malware phoning home for orders, and it is the indicator that ties the whole hunt together.
And notice what we just did, because this is the exam mindset. We never trusted the running machine. We read the file on disk, we listed the live connections, and we watched the log stream. 3 independent views the malware could not fake all at once, and that is how you beat a thing built to hide.
Our new analyst Marcus escalated a confirmed beacon to his incident response team, isolated the laptop from the network, and went home knowing he caught a live intrusion on night 1. That is the difference between memorizing a word list and being able to do the job, and it is exactly the mindset the exam rewards.
So we can name the malware, and we can hunt its indicators. Now the part that actually protects you, which is defense in depth. Layer prevention with detection, and never rely on a single wall. How do you stop this crew, and when it slips past, how do you catch it? This is where Objective 2.1 and 2.4 shake hands.
Start with how detection works, because there are 2 engines under the hood, and the exam wants you to know both. The old one is signature-based. Your antivirus keeps a giant list of known bad fingerprints, and it matches every file against that list. It is fast, and it is exact.
And it has one fatal blind spot. A signature can only catch malware someone has already seen and catalogued. Change 1 byte, or write something brand new, and the fingerprint no longer matches. Signature detection is a bouncer with a photo book, perfect for the faces in the book, useless for a stranger.
Which is exactly why behavior-based detection exists. Instead of asking, what does this file look like, it asks, what is this file doing? A document that suddenly starts encrypting thousands of files, or a browser spawning PowerShell in the background, gets flagged even if nobody has ever seen it before. That is how you catch fileless malware and a true 0-day.
Let me put the two side by side because a question will make you pick the right tool for the scenario. Signatures win on speed and on being sure. When they fire, there is almost no false alarm because the fingerprint matched exactly. But they miss anything new. Behavior wins on catching the unknown, the novel sample, and the fileless attack. It just costs you more false positives because unusual is not always malicious.
So neither one alone is the answer, and that is the whole lesson. The modern tool that fuses them has a name the exam wants: EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response. The old antivirus only tried to prevent matching signatures at the door. EDR assumes something eventually gets passed, so it watches behavior across the whole endpoint and lets you respond fast when it does.
So detection is half the story. What actually keeps the malware from landing in the first place? Because WannaCry proved that prevention was sitting right there.
The boring controls that win, and I mean boring as the highest compliment, because these are the ones that would have stopped the worst worm in history. Let me walk the checklist the exam expects you to reach for. First, patch fast, because an installed update closes the exact door Eternal Blue used. Second, least privilege, so a user who clicks the wrong thing cannot hand the whole machine to an attacker. Third, application allow listing, so only approved programs run at all. Fourth, disable legacy protocols like SMB version 1 that should have died years ago. And fifth, the one that neutralizes ransomware entirely. Offline, encrypted backups. If your files are safely copied somewhere the malware cannot reach, then encryption stops being a catastrophe and becomes an afternoon of restoring. CISA says it plainly: keep offline backups and patch promptly, and you take the attacker's whole business model away.
One honest note, because this is where advice usually goes soft. Backups are the strong play, but they are not free and they are not effortless. A backup you never test can fail the day you need it, and double extortion ransomware still threatens to leak the copy it stole. So backup, yes, but test the restore and do not assume backups alone let you ignore prevention.
And the tempting shortcut nobody should take: just pay the ransom and move on. Erica, is that ever the smart call?
It is the worst option, and here is the honest reasoning rather than a slogan. Paying is no guarantee. You are trusting a criminal to hand back a working key, and plenty of victims pay and get nothing. It also marks you as a payer, so you get hit again, and it funds the next attack on someone else. The exam answer and the CISA guidance is restore from backup and report it, not pay. The one that fits a real business is prevention plus tested backups, every time.
So we have the two detection engines and the whole prevention stack on the table. But there is a fork every real security team argues over, and it is worth a genuine debate before we wrap. When the budget is tight and you can only lean one way, do you bet on signatures, the fast and certain net? Or on behavior, the one that catches what nobody has seen yet? Erica reads the record and leans toward the certain low-noise net. Lewis has watched the threat landscape for decades and leans toward catching the unknown. I will sit in the middle and keep them honest. Erica, make the case for signatures.
Signatures are the workhorse, and the numbers back it. The overwhelming majority of what actually hits a normal network is known, cataloged malware, and signatures crush it instantly with almost no false alarms. A small team drowning in alerts needs the tool that is fast, cheap, and sure before it needs the clever one. And false positives are not a footnote, they are how detection dies. Flood an analyst with behavioral alerts that turn out to be nothing, and they stop reading the alerts. Signatures earn trust because when they fire, they are right. That reliability is why they are still the first layer on every endpoint.
I have watched that argument lose for 30 years, and here is where it breaks. You cannot fingerprint what nobody has seen yet. A 0-day has no signature on day 1 by definition, and fileless malware never leaves a file to fingerprint. Signatures assume you already met the threat. Behavior is what saves you when signatures miss, and signatures always eventually miss. The entire hunt in this episode was behavioral. A beacon phoning home every 60 seconds has no signature, but its pattern screams. That is the detection that catches the attack that was built specifically to have no fingerprint.
Hold on, Lewis, before you go further. Push back on the cost side. Behavioral detection means more false positives and often a bigger team to triage them. For a tiny shop, is a good signature engine not just the realistic answer?
Fair hit, and for a tiny shop, yes, start with signatures because they are cheap and reliable. But behavior is not all or nothing anymore. Modern EDR ships tuned behavioral rules out of the box, so even a small team gets zero-day coverage without building a war room. You do not need an army. You need the engine that watches for the pattern.
And honestly, that is closer to my view than it first sounds. We are not really opponents. Signatures shrink how often the known stuff gets through, behavior shrinks how long the unknown stuff stays once it does. Bet everything on signatures and a single 0 day owns you for months undetected. Bet everything on behavior and you drown in noise and miss the obvious.
Which is exactly why the modern tool fuses both. EDR runs signatures for the known and behavioral analytics for the unknown on the same endpoint. The whole industry moved from prevent only to prevent plus detect to detect with both. Nobody serious ships one engine anymore.
So here is the verdict, and it is the one the published frameworks back. MITRE ATT and CK exists precisely because static signatures came too late, so it pushed the industry toward mapping attacker behavior. And the NIST cybersecurity framework names protect and detect as separate core functions for exactly this reason. The frameworks would not split them if either one alone were enough.
So the honest answer is not signatures versus behavior. It is signatures first because they are fast, cheap, and certain, layered with behavior to catch the 0 day and the fileless attack they will always miss. That is defense in depth, and on the exam, one perfect single control is always the wrong answer.
So here is the one thing to carry home from this whole episode. Name malware by what it does, hunt it by the fingerprints it leaves, and layer your defenses so nothing you have not seen yet gets a free pass. And before this video ends, go check that your own machine has automatic updates turned on. That single toggle would have stopped the biggest worm in history. Quick recap before we close. Classify malware by behavior, never by name. Ask how it spreads and what its payload does, and the whole list sorts itself. Then hunt it by the fingerprints it leaves. And layer signatures with behavior so nothing new walks in free.
The number I cannot unhear is 60. Every 60 seconds, the same packet to the same address. That metronome heartbeat is a command and control beacon, and you will never mistake it for normal traffic again.
And the first thing I would do tonight is the one toggle that beats a worm. Open your settings and confirm automatic updates are on, then set up one offline backup. The free patch and a spare copy are the whole point.
Next time we go live with the on-path attack, we poison a victim's ARP table and watch their credentials cross a real packet capture, the exact thing that makes public Wi-Fi dangerous.
If this finally made the malware list click, hit like and subscribe so this series keeps building toward your pass. And the free practice quizzes for this objective are waiting at certs.professorerica.com, so test yourself before exam day.
One we genuinely could not settle today. If you found a 60-second beacon phoning out from a machine on your network right now, what is your very first move? Isolate it, capture the traffic, or pull the plug? Tell us why in the comments.
I do not know yet is a complete sentence. Use it.
Liam crushed it today. 9 out of 10, only because I am a tough grader. This is Professor Erica. Thanks for watching and signing off.